each of these archetypes can be broken down into smaller parts, into elements. And we found that they could be broken down into 8 separate elements each. So we end up with 8 archetypes, each of which has 8 elements. It makes a grid, 8 by 8, 64, like a chessboard, or sort of like the I Ching, if you're into looking at Zen and Eastern religion. You'll find that, in fact, the I Ching is not far off. We didn't realize this when we were charting out Dramatica, but all of those different relationships among the characters represent aspects of the single human mind. And when you go from the larger archetypical functions or facets and break them down into their component parts so that each one has an equal number of component parts going down the same level of detail, you'll find that's pretty much what they did in the I Ching. It's pretty close. For that one level, now Dramatica has 4 levels, but for that one level of 64 elements, the exact same elements are pretty much there, and pretty much in the same kind of arrangement. Again, this was discovered after we'd worked it out through looking at stories and using the story mind concept. So if you're describing a human mind, and you want to make an 8 by 8 grid to show how these different archetypal characters could each have 8 elements that represented a complete spectrum for each of them of sort of being having the same depth as a human being, but only one part of the one facet of that human being, but with complete depth, you end up with the same grid, whether it's the I Ching or Dramatica. It's just a human truism. Now, what we divided these into is we found that the protagonist represented the 8 elements, and only 2 of them we really talked about in detail, the motivation elements. Now, the characters actually had 4 dimensions: motivations, methodologies, means of evaluation, and purposes. And we'll talk about those again a little later this evening. But for now, let's say that each one has 2 elements in it, each dimension of character. So to be completely deep, a character must be 4-dimensional, not 3-dimensional. So we end up with 2 elements in each of the 4 dimensions: motivation, methodology, standard of evaluation or means of evaluation, and purpose for each of these characters. Now, why 2 elements? Because there is an inside and an outside quality in each dimension. In other words, when it's dealing with the internal problem of the story mind, there's going to be 1 element in each dimension, and also each archetype will have 1 element in each dimension that represents how they deal with the external problem. Now, looking at motivations alone for a moment, forgetting about the other 3 dimensions, the protagonist represents pursue and consider. Pursue the outside solution, consider the inside solution. Pursue an end to the outside problem, consider how to end the inside problem. And that is kind of matching. You see, they're both proactive, inside and outside. That's why they're archetypical. And the other dimensions do the same thing. Antagonist is just the reverse. The antagonist represents, instead of pursue, prevent or avoid. Prevent's more of a proactive response, avoid is a more passive response, but they're both against pursue. And, in addition, over here where it's consider, the antagonist represents either don't consider, non-consideration, or reconsider. Again, passive and active. Passive is non-consideration. I won't even consider it. And active is, you better reconsider. That's more the way it's used in Star Wars, where the Empire tries to get people to reconsider. Now, down here in reason, we have the reason character, and they represent logic on the inside and control on the outside, which again go hand in hand, archetypically. But instead of logic and control, the emotional archetype, motivationally, is driven by feeling and uncontrol. So again, they have a relationship that puts them in opposition, although not direct opposition. The sidekick represents faith and support, the skeptic, disbelief, and oppose. And on the guardian, you have conscience and help. And on the contagonist, you have temptation and hinder. Now, when they go together in this manner, you were able to look at Luke Skywalker. Empire is the antagonist. Reason is Leia. Emotion, Chewbacca. Sidekick, robot. Skeptic, Han Solo. Guardian, Obi-Wan. And contagonist is Darth Vader.